Welcome to Needed Conversations. I'm your host, Ryan Cole. My wife, Victoria, is not with me today because she's working on our new house and doing some other things, but also because I am having a very special one-on-one interview with Trevor Hanson. He is the founder of The Art of Healing by Trevor. He's got hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram. He's a licensed family therapist, and he focuses on emotionally based therapy and trauma focused approaches to healing. And this conversation, let me just tell you, is so dynamic. We deal with anxiety, communication in marriage, even a little bit on parenting and how to help your kids through emotions. There's so much here. You don't want to miss this conversation. But before we jump into that interview, I want to remind you that by becoming a partner with Empowered Culture Ministries, you unlock access to our intentional marriage community, which is our online platform where you get weekly devotionals, online interaction with other couples, monthly date ideas, monthly group sessions, curated courses, so much more. It's for as little as $5 or more per month. Just become a partner and you unlock all of that. So go now to moremostforever.com and become a partner. Also, remember we have our Forevermore Marriage Getaway coming up on August 30th and 31st, 2024. It's going to be in Greenville at Hotel Hartnest. All of the information is there on our site as well, moremostforever.com. Follow us on Instagram. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast, or if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, that like button. It helps with the algorithms and helping us reach more people. Share this with a friend, especially if you're in the middle of it and you're like, wow, this is insightful. Share this with somebody, your spouse. But let's meet Trevor Hanson. He is the founder of The Art of Healing by Trevor, and he is bringing his wealth of experience and helping couples overcome challenges like unforgiveness, trauma, anxiety. He has so many wonderful resources online, and we're going to get into some of those. But today we're going to be having a needed conversation about dealing with anxiety in marriage and how to overcome some of these communication hurdles that couples face. This is one of the primary challenges that is rooted to every other dysfunction in your marriage. How do you communicate what you're feeling? How do you identify some of the negative cycles that you engage in personally, not just pointing the finger at your spouse, but how you respond, how you share yourself with your spouse, or how you withhold yourself? We're going to be talking about all of that. Trevor, welcome to the podcast. I like to start every interview by letting our audience get to know a little bit about the guests. So would you please just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, maybe a little bit about your family and what you like to do for fun?
Yeah, sure. So I am originally from Utah, and we currently are in California for the next few months as our family gets ready to make our transition to moving to Hawaii, where I used to go to school, and we have a lot of friends and family there. And so we're kind of in this crazy little phase right now. Where we're like homeless, kind of semi-homeless. And it's fun though. I have a new baby boy. He's what is it? He's almost 5 months old now, and it's just like the best thing in the world. My first, and yeah, it's been super rewarding. And I I'm a marriage and family therapist, like I'm licensed marriage and family therapist, and I also do some coaching work as well. But it's funny because having him just totally like I don't know, opens my eyes to another layer of the importance of like strong relationships and strong marriages, and just how fundamental that is for, you know, raising kids and raising society, quite frankly. And so, yeah, a lot of fun transitions in our life with new members of the family and new locations coming up. It's really exciting.
That is exciting. Congratulations on the new baby. We
Thanks.
have two of our own. Right now, they're 5 and 7, and they definitely change your life for sure. And they teach you a lot about yourself. I know
Yeah.
yours is still a newborn, but once they start talking, and we try to get them to talk, especially the first one, as quick as we can. And then when they start talking, we're like, all of the questions. And then it's like a big mirror. It's like, really? Is this what my parents dealt with when I was a kid? But I want to jump right into sort of the heart of your story, because
Mm.
your journey to starting the art of healing is very inspiring to say the least. From my understanding, you worked for Tesla, I think, very
Yeah.
active, single, and then you had an accident that put everything into perspective. Speaking of defining moments,
Yeah.
and that became a catalyst for the person you are today. Tell us about what happened and how that became a defining moment for you.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a honestly, it's kind of like a series of moments, honestly, where a lot of things just so happen to intersect at once. Where I was working at Tesla and, it felt like the big show, like it was awesome. I was a manager, I was managing people, had a good amount of responsibility at a really cool company. And around that time, they had a shift, like a strategic shift in how they did like the sales process. And I was a manager of a sales team. And essentially, they were trying to look to a more passive way of selling where they didn't need strategic managers. And so I got laid off. I also ended a relationship that was bound for marriage. Like we were basically engaged, like unofficially. I mean, we had a date, but there was no ring, kind of a thing. And so that fell apart. Thankfully, it was not good. And around that same time, I broke my jaw in a skiing accident. I was ran into by another skier. And then I would say, about a year later, and during that year, between one accident to the next one that I'm going to mention here, there was a second accident that I shattered my eye socket and like blew out like all the bones in there. And I've had many, many surgeries to the point where I still suffer a little bit with double vision in certain areas because essentially the muscles in my eyes don't pull in sync and like work properly. And so between the jaw, and which that all happened with losing my job, ending the engagement, and everything all at once. I was like, I literally feel like Job right now. I'm like, God, you got anything else you want to throw at me? And so I had it all. And then between that time, I started to kind of go to therapy, started to explore, you know, myself, started to understand why did I let myself get into such a hard relationship like that, a toxic relationship like that, and why do I act the way I do? What is it like when I'm trying to date, and where does this anxiety come from? Because I had a lot of anxiety about being good enough and trying to find the one, and being really fearful that I wasn't going to, and all this other stuff. And I did
Mm,
quite a bit of healing around that. And if you're familiar with the term like anxious attachment, I was definitely healing anxious attachment and becoming more whole and confident in that way. And then, so fast forward through that year, I along the way decided that I was going to go and totally just shift careers into becoming a therapist. Didn't really know exactly where they'd take me. And wow, I'm super glad that I did. Like, it's so much more rewarding from you know, from every standpoint, whether it's you wouldn't think that becoming a therapist would be more rewarding financially than working at Tesla, but it is. And you wouldn't think that, the fulfillment, you would probably think, oh, yeah, that's probably fulfilling. And it is very fulfilling. And there's just so many things that are really cool. I feel like I'm on purpose all of the time. Like the things that are the most purposeful in my life, I'm just doing constantly. I don't take a break, which is great. Like that's the definition of having purpose. And so anyway, I shattered my eye socket, and I remember there was a time right after when I got my first surgery where it was pretty humbling. I had one of my eyelids sewn shut because I wasn't allowed to open it for the healing process of what was going on. They had to replace basically the floor of my eye socket, like put in a plate and reconstruct, my nose. And it's a bit crooked still. I got a little J hook
oh,
because of it. And I remember this one was sewn shut, and the other one was just like so weepy and tired that it basically stayed closed. And so for a few days, for the most part, I was just kind of in darkness. Like I had my eyes shut, and I remember I had spent those days at my parents, and during that time, I was in rough enough shape that I would have to sit on a stool with like my board shorts on, and my mom would like shower me up, basically. Like I just like couldn't do anything for myself. And when you spend a lot of time in that position, you get real humbled, and all you have time to do is just sit and listen because I can't really see anything. And so I remember just like listening and listening to what I consider the promptings from God, thoughts in my head, the things that are just like I don't know important. And I remember I got a lot of different promptings and things that were important that I would write down. But one of them, I remember, you know, during that time, I had the thought, you're going to find her soon. And I was like, what? Oh,
Mm,
I like that. Like, what's soon? And I knew what her meant. It's like, the one I hope to be with. And I was like, soon could be 3 years. It could be 3 days. It could be 3 weeks. It was more in the order of 3 weeks when I met my wife thereafter. And that that accident, the other accident, the broken off engagement, the relationship. And meanwhile, if we rewind to the broken jaw, I remember everyone was like, "Oh, how are you healing? How are you doing? And they didn't know about the job loss or the loss of the relationship. Most people had no idea. They just saw the jaw. So they would say it, and a part of me would want to be like, it's really hard, and I feel like I'm going to cry all the time. This is really difficult, and I'm like working through the middle of it. But I would just, keep it focused on the job. Like, yeah, it's getting better. Like, it's good. Like, I'm eating solids again, things like that. But yeah, it was incredible. And there's times in our lives, there's times during that period of my life where I remember wishing I had a big red button that I could hit and just like rewind and avoid all the things that I'd been going through. It's like I wouldn't
mm,
go ski on that particular day or down that particular hill with that guy next to me who ran into me, or I wouldn't have dated that person, or I would have done things different here or there. And I remember really, really wanting it to the point where I'd think about that button almost like as a temporary relief. I'd think about it and I'd imagine hitting it and like what life would be like. And then when my imagination was done thinking about it, I'd come back to the real life and it would hit me harder and it would, it'd be really terrible. But now, if that button actually existed, oh man, I would have a hard time not escalating into violence to protect it from anyone who tried to touch that button because of what it's done for me, how it's changed my life. The purpose that I found because of that suffering is
mm.
immense. So I guess that's a long version of the answer to your question.
No, I love that. Crisis is an invitation to transformation. And it's interesting you talked about wanting to hit that reset button at times. I was watching this new music video by this artist, Ariana Grande. She's got this new thing out. And I was watching this music video because I'm into art and cinematography and that sort of thing. And it was a great setup. But the concept was crazy. She goes into this medical room and she signs, all of the forms and stuff. And she brings in this box of stuff, evidently from a former lover or whatever. And they begin to examine these items and they go in and scan her neurological system and start hitting the delete button on all those things. And then she walks
Mm,
out of there and you could tell her like she's different as a person. And I was talking to my wife, I said, I think that that technology actually could exist one day. I don't know. The technology
maybe.
that's been advancing over the last decades is astounding. So it wouldn't surprise me. But what would our society be like if we didn't have those experiences to lean
Mm,
upon and it shaped us into the person that we became? And I think that that's too why therapy is so important so that you can reframe those things and allow those to push you into a transformation instead of keeping you paralyzed in this state of victimhood or fear of the
mm,
unknown. And we've seen a transformation in therapy over the last couple decades. More people are going to therapy, it's less taboo, which is
mm.
really great. But at the same time, when something becomes trendy, it's like therapy's everywhere and now everybody's got they're a therapist or whatever. You're different and you're resonating online for a few reasons. One of which is how you deal with emotions and helping people to reframe their experiences, and particularly in relationships. Talk to us about your philosophy on therapy and how you help people deal with those emotions.
Yeah. So so the concept or the theory that I hold behind therapy is, and you're talking about like difficult emotions, and I guess I'm gonna take some liberties there and talk about what are the difficult emotions that we deal with. And I think understanding, okay, what do we do with them? We need to understand where do they come from, their origins. And where's the origin of a deep emotional state, because there's like a temporary emotional state, like, oh, I feel pretty happy, my circumstances are good, the sun is shining, that's huge, that's great. But there's also these deep emotional states that kind of are our underlying programming, where we're either feeling pretty safe and secure and happy and fairly optimistic most of the time, with little waves in between as circumstances change and hard things happen or good things happen. But others have an underlying emotional programming that is a bit more fearful, a bit more stressed, a bit more anxious, a bit, less happy, and what we might call insecure. And I talk a lot about the difference between security and insecurity. Security is just, I feel confident, I feel safe in the world, love is plentiful, I'm lovable, I believe that love will be reciprocated, if not by you, by somebody. And so I'm not really worried about it. I feel okay. And the insecure is the opposite. I don't believe that. Love is scarce. Love has to be earned. I'm not lovable, or at least I'm not sure if I am. And so I got to do everything I can to prove it. And so these two emotional states, and this is maybe where I differ than some therapists, a bunch of really good ideas and logical reframes in therapy are great. They have purpose at times. But I feel like if you want sustainable change that lasts for a long time, you need to heal the underlying nervous system. And the nervous system is healed just in the way it's damaged, through emotional experience. So, what I mean is, let's say you grew up with a highly critical mother who, continued to send you kind of this underlying message that says, you're not good enough, or in order to be enough for me, you have to perform here, here, and here. I only give you attention when you perform well, or you make me happy, or whatever else. And so this is an emotional experience. It's very anxious, anxiety provoking for a child. And it doesn't even have to be like a really abusive parent or anything. It could just be a parent who, let's say, maybe they're not even highly critical. Maybe it's a different version of the same story. They're really, really anxious themselves, and so you again learn that I got to make mom happy in order for her to be accessible. I got to, do my song and dance. I got to make her smile. I got to keep the peace in the home. All of these duties hang over your head that provide a lot of anxiety. If your access to love and connection is contingent upon your inputs and your behavior as a child, that's going to be pretty anxious, anxiety provoking. And so that's an emotional experience that created an underlying emotional cadence or emotional programming of insecurity. So, how do we heal it? Well, let's flip it on its head and create a new emotional experience, one that is healing, and that could look like, doing guided visualization work into some inner child stuff. It could be working with a really close attachment figure. Maybe it's like doing work with mom or with dad in the room, or with your partner, where some of those insecurities start to show up, right? Being able to, it makes it, make it explicit and honor it. Like the moment when you can turn and go, wow, I realize that I get angry and critical when you don't come close to me. I realize that it's just because this underlying fear that, like, you know, you're going to leave me or you're going to abandon me, because that's what I felt like happened growing up. And it's not you. It's just, I really long to be close to you. And it's like, well, you're taking ownership. Even the act of passing that to another person is that emotional experience. And if you can have somebody on the other side catching that with love and gentleness and acceptance, you're starting to rewrite the nervous system. Like, this is awesome. And you don't have to have another person there to do it. You can do it individually. But my big theory is change comes through new corrective emotional experiences. And so that's, I guess, my bit of a, and not to say that I'm the only one by any means. There's a lot of therapists and others that align with me there. But that's my take on how we approach healing.
Is because I sometimes feel like we are trapped in these cycles because of those emotional experiences that we had as a child. And
Yep.
then our very anxieties and fears almost become like self-fulfilled
Yep.
prophecies,
Yep.
and we attract those experiences by the very
Yep.
fear itself to a certain
Yep.
degree. Would you say
Yeah.
so?
Absolutely. I'll give you an example of this. I'll give you one from my own life. So, when we look at the lens of, like, for those of you who are familiar with the terminology that are listening, the anxious attachment, the person who falls in that bucket, is kind of particularly, I think we're all, in a sense, afraid of rejection, but maybe they're more afraid of rejection. They're more afraid that they're not quite good enough. There's a lot of self doubt. There's a lot of anxiety about being chosen and a fear of not being chosen. So, in like a dating setting, this was me. I would become, that underlying anxiety would lead me to a behavior, how I cope with it. And how I coped with it would do things like maybe, have really long, elaborate dates early on in dating, like the first or second date. Meanwhile, this girl doesn't even know me. She's getting worn out. Like that's a lot to commit to like, go to the lake for a first date. It's like, no, just go get ice cream and call it after an hour. Like that's what I like. It's like if she wants you, great. Then you're like a Costco sample. She's going to come back for more. And if you don't like her, then great. You don't have to hang out with her anymore. Or if she doesn't like you, great. It was short. And y'all, you only spent like $10 on ice cream. Life goes on, right? But I wouldn't. I would drag them out, or maybe I would over text, right? Or maybe be a little bit less boundaried around my own emotions, like wanting to show my like loving heart and like kind of pour out the sincerity that I have because I know that that's lovely and attractive and good. But maybe it came a little too early because I was just saying like, look, see me, like look at how good I am, look at all that I have. But all that emotional language, it's not quite ready. I mean, the relationship's not there. You have to have a deeper level of commitment to hear that stuff. Early relationships are about fun and just getting to know each other. It's not a terribly emotional place. I mean, it can be sometimes, but for the most part, defaulting to fun and lighthearted connection is usually where you need to start. But I wouldn't do that. And so the underlying fear of rejection or being alone would lead to them getting overwhelmed, my dates meaning, or them leaving, or not answering or pushing away. And so I would create the very thing that I was afraid of in the
Mm.
way I behave. And it happens over and over and over again. And this story is the same story that every client, and I'll say this 100%, every client that I ever worked with falls into the same pattern somehow. Maybe they cope in different
Mm.
ways. Maybe it's a different fear, you know, whatever it is. Maybe it's like addiction or drugs, right? I use drugs to avoid my pain of, you know, just the hurt of being lonely or not good enough or being rejected growing up. And the more I do that, the more horrible I feel, the more distant from society I get, the more isolated I am, the worse I feel about myself. It's the same exact prophecy. The more I feel depressed, the more I isolate myself to try to cope with it. I go into my dark little hole, and the less purpose I have. And so, therefore, I wind up being more depressed. It's just these self-fulfilling prophecies over and over and over. And if you can recognize yours, man, there's like a way to get out, which is really exciting.
Let's talk about how this materializes in marriage because that's the majority of our
Mm,
listeners. We help
mm,
couples through workshops, etc. And the biggest hurdle to overcome is the communication gap. And
yeah.
how we communicate is often led by what you're talking about right now is these unresolved, unaddressed feelings that we keep. In a sense, I've seen even at times one spouse project upon another, and they
Mm, mhm.
believe something about their spouse because again it's the self-fulfilled prophecy, and it's not allowing their spouse to fully love and embrace them.
Yeah,
Does that make
yeah,
sense? Talk about how
absolutely.
it affects marriages.
Well, this is where we start to get into the concept of the negative cycle, drawn from principles of emotionally focused therapy, which is one of the two most evidence based and research backed approaches to treating couples. Gottman and emotionally focused therapy; those are the kind of the standards. I'm an emotionally focused therapist. And that means that I see things from a lens of attachment, which is exactly what you're talking about. My early attachment creates some sort of underlying fear, anxiety, or construct of beliefs that I hold on to that were built through childhood and probably reinforced through the current marital or, romantic relationship if you're not married. And the nature of that looks like two self-fulfilling prophecies combining into one. Sounds like a Marvel movie. Like, ooh, this is awesome. So
Yeah.
we've got two fulfilling prophecies. So what let's take the classic example where you have one who's a bit more anxiously attached. They long for closeness. They're very fearful of losing closeness, fear of rejection. And when they cope with that feeling, when they feel those fears that came from childhood, maybe mom or dad wasn't as emotionally accessible and they feel like they had to earn love, right? We're talking about one group of people already. So we kind of know what they look like. So they already have that fear going on of, I need to earn love. I need a lot of validation. I need a lot of reassurance. I need checkpoints to know that I'm okay. And love is scarce. And I've got to manage love, like make sure that it's here. I got to control it in a way. And so when their partner, you know, does something that feels less loving, they forget something, they come home late, maybe their partner kind of goes quiet during a conversation because they're not quite sure what to say. We're going to get to that other side too. They start to have all those old anxious attachment fears come up and come alive. And so because of that, they will often cope through more of a pursuing type behavior, critical. It's like pointing out the thing that's wrong. And logically, it kind of makes sense. Like, if I can just point out what you're doing wrong, then you can fix it. But
Mm,
we don't really operate that way. The other person, that then triggers their attachment fears. So maybe the other one grew up in a place that said, you can't show your emotions. You got to take care of yourself. If you're going to cry, go to your room. Like, we don't do that in our home. We don't talk about things. And just kind of maybe this underlying, longing for some closeness, but also some fear in it because closeness might not have been totally warm and accessible. Like, it wasn't a thing. We didn't say I love you growing up. And a lot of times men will fall into that category more than women, but they can, it's not gender specific necessarily. And so what happens when the anxiously attached begins to pursue and get critical? Hey, you're doing this wrong. You're not showing up for me. You're this. All the other side hears is, you're not good enough. You know, I'm not safe to connect with, just like your mom and dad. This isn't safe. You're not okay. And if you try to engage, it's going to be worse because when you grew up, trying to engage in a conversation made things worse. And so don't do that. Go to your default, what's safe. And so they'll retreat to safety. But retreating to safety isn't actually safe. It looks like shutting down and withdrawing, ignoring your partner, leaving the room, going to the garage and working on something rather than staying and working on the relationship. And what happens there is that becomes the anxiously attached trigger. So the more the anxiously attached pursues and criticizes, the more avoidantly attached, which is the second person. We didn't label it that way yet, but they're more avoidant in how they cope. They become more withdrawn and shut down. And the more they become withdrawn and shut down, wow, that sends another message that, hey, anxiously attached, I'm not going to be there for you. I am going to abandon you. Your feelings don't matter to me. Whoa, I'm going to get more upset. So I'm going to get more critical. You always just shut down. You never even talk to me. You just run away whenever we try to talk. And then it just triggers the other side again. So we get things like, you know, criticize, withdraw, and usually some defensiveness kind of sprinkled in there too. And it becomes a self fulfilling prophecy. But what's amazing about this and what's beautiful is that we can slow it all down. We start to realize, oh my gosh, behind the whole cycle, we share the same thing. We long to be close, but we want to know that it's safe. We want to be heard, and we both think the world of the other person. The only reason I hurt and I get critical and pursue you is because I love you and you're my person and I want to be close to you. And the only reason I withdraw and shut down is because I'm afraid of making things worse. And I hate it when I do that. And when we do that, and then we're disconnected and we're not close. And that's painful for me because I, again, long for you. I long to be close. The underlying message is so warm, so inviting. It's like, man, that's some tasty messages down there. That sounds so good. But we've got to be able to figure out how to find those underlying vulnerabilities and express them. And let me add one more thing. I know my answer is really long here, but to where this ties up, kind of puts a beautiful bow on it, is the experience of sharing the underlying vulnerabilities that are much more connecting. That's what's transformational. Again, emotional experience creates transformation. As you share with one another and you catch, you make it safe, there's something emotional that happens. It's like you get one layer of security. Oh, wow, I'm really secure about that. I really feel safe with you. I feel safe and seen. And so, later when we're not perfect people and something happens, we don't read into it too much. It doesn't make us as afraid because we have all this safety to rely back on. It's like, well, yeah, okay, well, she's in a bit of a mood, but like life goes on. I'm going to be okay. Or like, well, yeah, but he's not quite ready to talk about this. And that you know, it's not my favorite, but I'll be okay because we have this underlying sense of safety. We're okay. And the fights don't start, they don't get ramped up because our fear isn't ramped up. We might not find it convenient when our partner's being a little more snappy or a little less accessible, but we can handle it to a greater degree because we just know that we're still safe. It's okay.
A lot of people listening right now are saying, "That's exactly my marriage." You described us right there. And, to be honest, sitting here, my wife and I, we have come through a lot of the work that you're talking about too, but we kinda fall into that category of,
Yeah.
you know, one of us is the withdrawn and et cetera. Talk about what they can do as an alternative strategy, and it's not really addressing behavior because I know what you're talking about is addressing those emotions and reconnecting to a different kind of emotion with your spouse. But let's take the one who withdraws. One of the
Okay.
weapons that is often used in marriage is either withholding sex or the silent treatment.
Mm,
So when that person feels the urge to punish their spouse with one of those, what
yeah.
should they do instead to confront those emotions and reconnect a different
Yeah.
emotion?
Yeah, yeah. Well, punishment, I guess reverse engineer it a little bit. If there's a punitive action, if there's punishment, then there's an offense. And so kind of asking yourself, okay, what is the perceived offense here? Like what's happening? And you're probably going to land on some sort of behavior. They're not listening to me. Okay, okay, great. That's fine. But what does not listening to you mean to you? Well, maybe it means that they don't care about me. Oh, okay, so you start to think that they don't care about you. All right, we're starting to dig a little bit deeper here. And if they don't care about you, what's that like to be in that place? Like, what does that feel like? Well, it's terrifying. It's lonely. It's hurtful because I love them. Whoa, we just landed on something really important and much more accessible. So if we kind of play this back, how can we how can we because well, first of all, I think you need to take ownership and say, punishing my spouse is never a good strategy because the only thing you're doing is sending them a message that says, I want to hurt you, you know, I don't care about you. I'm going to treat you like a child, like whatever it is. It's just never going to work. And so knowing like, okay, I have to do harder work, which is kind of reverse engineering it, asking yourself, what's the message behind what they're doing that I'm picking up? Is the message even accurate? Right? Maybe I'm misinterpreting the situation. What? And this, man, this is a really tricky one. I guess I'm gonna give you two parts. Let me finish the first one. It's funny, so many things come into my head at once, and then I get too excited and I don't know which one to share with you first. But let's keep going down the train. Okay, so the message is they don't care about me. If they really don't care about me, that's hurtful, that's lonely, and I long for them. Well, could you share that with them instead of punishing them? Sometimes I feel like when you know you're not listening in the way that I need, or that I can't tell that you're listening, I start to feel like hurt. I start to feel lonely, and it might be just a story I make up in my head, but I start to feel like you don't care about me, and that's terrifying because you're the person I care about the most. Whoa, that's way more accessible than you're not getting sex or you're not getting this or that. Like way more accessible. And then I would say to take it to the next level, and this is much more hard, much more difficult, and it's going to take some great humility to do this. Asking yourself, and there's a caveat to this, and I'll share that after. But asking yourself, what am I doing to contribute to the behavior that I do not like in my spouse? If they're not listening, what am I doing to contribute to that? Well, maybe I'm just yelling at them. I'm getting super critical and telling them how horrible they are all the time. Of course, I don't want to listen to you. I don't want to listen to you who do that either. Like nobody wants to listen to that. And it's like, okay, so maybe you need an adjustment on how you approach your needs. Oh, okay. Maybe I need to learn how to express my needs and hold my boundaries in a way that's loving and connecting. and then they'll listen to me. Okay, great. And here's the caveat. I don't want to say like put people in a position where I'm like blaming the victim or being like, it's your fault if your partner's not listening to you, right? Let's leave blame out of it and look at it from really just almost like a strategic position. Like, okay, is there something I'm doing to contribute to that? And it doesn't mean that they're off the hook for, not listening to you. It doesn't mean that their behavior is commendable because it's your fault. No, it's always not good to listen to your spouse. You got to listen to your spouse no matter what. And that's where their ownership has to come in. Hey, no matter how they treat me, no matter what they say, I either got to listen. And if it's so bad that I truly can't listen, I need to hold a boundary and say, listen, I need to detach. I need to move in a different direction. Like both of you have to take 100% ownership. So I'm not trying to, blame the victim here, but I'm trying
Right.
to empower the person who feels like a bit of a victim. Because if you're punishing your spouse, then you're feeling like a victim. And I want to help you get out of that by helping you understand what you're actually feeling and deliver it in a way that they can understand and connect with, and adjust what you're doing and asking yourself, how am I contributing to this negative cycle? How am I creating the very thing that I don't want? That self fulfilling prophecy.
Now, let's talk about what the other spouse can do as well. And of course, all of this is with the underlying assumption that if you're experiencing this therapy, reach out, take one of Trevor's courses online for sure. But as far as a right now actionable response, that other spouse, they have been ignored now, let's say for
Yeah.
3 days, their spouse
Yeah.
is not talking to them. How can they nudge their spouse in the right direction or re engage them or help them to open back up?
Mm. Yeah. My goodness, there's a lot of humility in this conversation today because the first thing that comes to my mind is the opposite of what you would naturally want to do. You naturally want to pursue them and tell them how wrong they are for being silent. And here's the thing, they might be wrong. Like, I'm not saying that it's right, definitely not saying it's right. But to sit there and point out that they're doing it wrong or that it's not fair or that's not okay, um, is it going to work? No, it's just not going to work. They're probably going to double down and just get more upset because you're kind of getting critical. So I'd say move towards it with curiosity, and this is really hard to do. Hey, listen, I want to better understand, what's happening. I see you kind of pulling away from me, and offer up some empathetic understanding of where you're at. That's so painful. This is not what I envision. I envision us being close, right? Paint a little happy picture of the vision. I imagine Bob Ross. Paint a little happy relationship right here. And just like give them a little vision of that. Listen, I long to be close to you. I don't like it when we're disconnected. I want to set aside, my pride and be as curious and humble as I can. You have to, and I would say you both have to. Hopefully, you're both committed to do this and you can pick each other up when maybe the other one's lacking in this area. But you got to say, at the end of the day, uh, fairness is not always the number one priority, it's effectiveness. Like, if it's more effective and less fair to be curious and to say, because, yeah, it's probably not fair. Like, they've been shutting you out for 3 days. Of course, you have every right to be ticked off, but is that going to help you? Probably not. So let's shift into, hey, what's going on? I want to better understand this. And you might be faced with a bit of a blow up. Oh, you want to better understand why I'm so hurt? You want to understand like why I get so mad at you? And you're like, whoa, I, you got to be prepared for that. They're not quite there yet. Maybe they haven't landed their emotional plane quite yet. It's all up in the sky. It's up in the air. They're ramped up, and stay with curiosity. That's where you keep asking and listening for. I tell people, listen for these things. This is what I do in therapy. When people are loud and upset and all ticked off, because it happens sometimes when I'm working with people, is I'll listen for what's their longing. And I like the word longing because it's deeper than just a need. Need is like, I need you to come home on time and be with me. A longing is like, I need closeness with you. I need to feel like you choose me. Man, that's much more hitting home. What's your longing? What's the fear? Hey, I'm afraid you don't care about me, or I'm afraid you're going to leave me, or I'm afraid you want somebody different, or I'm afraid I'm not good enough. So, what's the longing? What's the fear? And then other emotions. Other emotions might be like, sadness or hurt. Oh, so it sounds like you feel hurt when I don't, listen to you in that way or reflect back what you're saying, or you feel like really hurt or isolated or lonely. So longing, fear, other emotions. And if you can listen through the chaos, through the barrage, if it's happening for those things, will happen and you propose them in a way. You're like, sounds like you're feeling this. They will begin to soften. Maybe not immediately. They might actually get more ramped up because they're finally getting heard. Yeah, exactly. Blah! And, it's like, I'm going to take stage, right? I have this opportunity, so I'm going to tell you. I say, like, hold on through it. Hold on. And just keep going back and slow yourself down. See if you can help them to slow down. Like, oh, I see that. Like you're feeling really hurt and isolated. Yeah, I'm feeling hurt and isolated. And I'm also feeling this. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for telling me. Right. Just stay right there. Stay curious.
Mm.
The best part about it is you don't even have to have like a good response. There's no retort. You're not arguing here. There's no defense. You're just making it a safe landing zone. And again, if we go back to the theory of emotional experiences create lasting change, you're creating a new emotional experience for them and for you. Wow, look at this. It's like safe. You can have all those feelings. You can have all that scary stuff, and I'm going to be right here for it. I'm just going to be curious. It's like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and really, if they're talking, well, the silent treatment is over, right? So, maybe
Yes,
move from reactionary to, like, empathy. We talk to couples a lot and tell them, most of the time we listened to respond because we have a defensive approach. Which one
Mm,
of my weapons in my arsenal am I gonna pull out? Instead
totally.
of listening to respond, we need to sit and listen for what they're actually trying to say. And
Oh
even
yeah.
if they're loud and in the moment, right? What are they communicating in that? Because now they've opened up. This is so good. There's two other kind of areas I want to go into before we end. One of which is how religion plays into this. I know you're a person of faith. We're Christians as well. And sometimes what we're working through is a lot of the misprogramming that happens in church around therapy, number one, and number two, how we deal with emotions, this idea of faith and being able to express like this is who what experienced and the feelings that I'm feeling. We're often taught to suppress and really strictly address the behavior. And as long as you look a certain way, then all is well in the world.
Right.
Have you has that been your experience with faith, or have you dealt with people in your practice that you've had to help them through those misunderstandings about God and religion and
Yeah.
all of that?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is really contingent upon how, you know, church culture influences that and how mom and dad teach, the gospel in the home and what that looks like. Cuz there's a lot of shame-based teaching of, the gospel where it's like you got to do X, Y, and Z and if you don't, essentially the message is you're a disappointment to God. It's like, oh man, shoot, that's a lot. Or, it doesn't matter how you feel. It's like you're saying, it's like what you did, right? Like, let's say you're coping with this underlying trauma and anxiety that comes from past experiences, and you choose to do things that, aren't aligned with gospel teachings, such as, drug abuse or, pornography or something to numb the emotion. And I think a lot of times it's maybe just very strictly focused on, well, don't do that instead of, oh, let's have empathy for why you're doing it, right? Let's validate why you're doing it. We don't have to validate the behavior. We're not going to sit there and validate, like,
Mhm.
yeah, go ahead and, like, you know, do those drugs and look at that porn. Like, that'd be great for you. Like, obviously, we're not going to do that, but we can validate and say, like, oh my goodness. So your loneliness and longing to be loved, but your complete isolation, draws you to use a pseudo love through pornography. Oh, okay. Can we heal that? Can we figure out a way to heal that underlying, loneliness? If get you more connected to the community, help you feel loved. And I think a lot of churches and a lot of people are shifting the way they do this kind of work because they're
Mhm.
becoming aware of it. And not to say that those in the past were evil or bad or anything. They're kind of working with what they had in a lot of ways. And so I
Mm.
think they're realizing now that, the the there's the culture of the gospel and then there's the actual gospel of Jesus Christ. And the actual gospel of Jesus Christ is one of empathy. complete love. We think about what the Savior did is he suffered everything for everyone. He felt our deepest fears and pains and understands, I believe, that it's not just he took upon himself sin, but he also understands the why we do the sin. And he understands the loss and the grief of, losing a child or having a divorce or having a debilitating illness or whatever. I feel like he's got to understand that. And that's part of the, you know, infinite atoning sacrifice that he
Yeah.
experienced. And to be able to have, it's like, why in the world would he do that if those feelings weren't important to him? And I think that there is a great, for my clients who are focused on faith-bound principles, I say, not that it's a competition, but I say you have an unfair competitive advantage over all my other clients because you have access to this real infinite source of healing, this real this divine place of healing as well. Like, wow, what's it like when you meet up with somebody who really knows exactly what you're going through? Well, you have access to that. It's like Christ did that, and you can find real healing through that. And there's also so many other ways where, the gospel aligns in this too. I mean, your underlying anxieties around anything, if you keep going, you say, okay, what if that really terrible thing happens to me? Well, if you keep going, well, what if, what if, what if, what if? At the end of this sentence, you'll say, I'll be okay because the game is rigged. Like God's plan wins. Like it's
Yeah.
already in place. Like no matter what happens to you, you know, you will be okay. There is a plan. God's got your back. He's not arbitrarily just punishing you and making you feel horrible in this life. If bad things are happening, it's because he's teaching you something. And sometimes you're like, I'm done with teaching. Like, please stop with the teaching. But
Right.
but man, what a comforting thing to say, like, wow, all suffering holds purpose and meaning as long as I believe that there's somebody, greater guiding me.
Mm. I'm thinking right now of Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well and
Mm,
that interaction he had with her. It's almost like a master class, so to speak, in more of a faith-based approach to therapy, but really it's
mm,
interlaced with some of these principles we've been talking about this whole episode,
mm,
and how when she first interacts with him, her reaction is defensive because of how she's been condemned before. I mean, she's been married
mm,
multiple times and religion has done this.
mm,
And then you have the racial tensions there as well. But after talking with him for a while, she begins to drink of this living water and her emotions connect to something deeper that transforms her from the inside out. And then you see how she goes. She probably would walk into a room of men with her head down in the past.
mm,
But then she
mm,
comes from that interaction with Jesus and she's running right into the middle of a group of men with this exuberance to tell them about a man that she just met. That just came to my thoughts. And I think that there's so many times we have a displacement of, okay, therapy here, church here. But I think
mm,
if we are looking at the gospel with the right
mm,
lens, it's like
mm.
it's all there. Even what this conversation, what we've been talking about, it's there.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it overlaps so heavily. And here's the thing, it's like, does it have to? No, I work with clients of all sorts of faith, including no faith in the respect to like religious type faith. And so, yeah, there's some healing there, but wow, you like I said have an incredible source to tap into when you bring your faith into your work. And so, if you're looking to work with a therapist or a coach or somebody, I'd say finding somebody who has at least a similar, whether it's you're a Methodist or a Baptist or a Church of Jesus Christ member or whatever, like at least there's some similar theme and basis of okay, we believe in these things because a lot of my sessions with certain clients, every single one is faith focused. It's like Christ comes into the conversation every single time with some of them, and those are weird. Those are really fun for me. I enjoy those anyway. It's like I get paid to do this. This is amazing.
That's great.
Yeah,
Last thing, you talked about how a lot of these emotions stem from the experiences that we have in our childhood. As a
yeah.
parent now, I'm helping my daughter work through anxiety. And I can
Yeah.
see some of the same things that I struggled with as a child. How do you implement some of these practices as a parent? I know you have a newborn right now, but
Yeah.
just give us some wisdom on how we as parents can help our young children deal with these big emotions and also maybe recognize when we're perpetuating what happened to us onto
Yeah.
them.
I think the same principles that we're talking about is calling forth the vulnerability. Like, you know, help them to make explicit what's alive in them right then. Oh, through again another principle, which is curiosity, right? Oh, what are you feeling afraid of right now? Okay, you feel a little bit nervous about this or that. Gotcha. Yeah. And if you can make that a safe landing zone, your job honestly isn't to relieve their anxiety. Like you might, but I think your job, most importantly, what will last the longest is you being a safe place for anxiety to live. It's like when I feel anxious, and that's maybe also where we get tripped up and where we perpetuate it, is that we do everything we can to try to make our kids feel better. It's like, mm, even to the point where they start to get the message that says you can't feel this sadness or you're not allowed
Mm.
to feel upset or whatever. They might interpret it that way and not start to feel like, it's not okay. And if they sense your anxiety about curing their anxiety, that makes them very anxious. We say that a mama's boy who's afraid to go out in the world and do everything, that does not happen from a over loving and nurturing parent. It does not happen that way. It happens from a overly anxious parent, overly protective parent, one who can't handle the emotions of their children and will get anxiously involved rather than curious and loving and in a way accepting of those emotions. Yeah, I feel anxious sometimes too. Hmm. Okay. Like, do you want to do something to help you feel better, or do you want to just kind of want to feel it for a minute and talk about how it feels? Like, give them options, right? Maybe we could go on a walk in some sunshine where I feel a little bit better. We could talk about how you feel. Oh, let's do both. Look at that. That's doing both. Like, we're getting sunshine and we're kind of processing. But I think making it a safe place and not responding with your own anxiety. Because at that point, then it's all about you and it's not safe for them.
Mm. This is so good. Well, Trevor, I've gotten so much out of this conversation today, and I know our listeners have as well. You've got so many resources. First off, if you're not following him on Instagram, what are you doing? The Art of Healing by Trevor. Go search him on Instagram. But also, you've got your anxiety toolkit. I love 19 Conversations Closer. Tell us
Mm.
about some of your resources. Where can they connect with you beyond
Yeah.
Instagram?
Yeah. So Instagram's a great place to start. So the Art of Healing by Trevor. You can also go to the artofhealingbytrevor.com. That's just my website where you can find like my different offers and things. But I would say try to go to Instagram first because that's where you're going to get like little snippets and insight into, what some of my other offers are. And, for those who really want to do the work, I say following people is cool and it makes you feel better because you feel like you're working. It's like getting a gym membership and then not really going. It's like I got one, like I feel good about it, and that's like following people on Instagram. But if you really want to do your work, dive into some of the deeper things that take a bit more of a commitment. Like it does take a financial investment to find some of that deeper healing and do that deeper work. And and in a sense, I think even the financial part of it makes leverages human psychology to help you get more out of it. When you pay for something, you wind up getting more out of it.
Right.
So there's a variety of things that you can use. One that is launching this month, the Healthy Lovers course, it will be launched. And that's really specific about kind of going back, understanding some of your own attachment history, understanding the negative cycle in your relationship, learning how to break the negative cycle. And there's also the Healthy Communication Workshop, which really pairs well with that offer. Healthy Communication Workshop is like skills based, like, hey, do these things and it's going to help you communicate better. The Healthy Lovers course is more like internal self transformation. And so when you combine the two, you really figure out how to show up better for you and your person.
Well, you heard it, guys. Go engage in all of those amazing resources. Follow him on Instagram and us as well at More Most Forever. Trevor, this has been a needed conversations. Thank you again for joining me.
Thank you.
Wow, that was a truly insightful episode. There's so much there, especially the part about religion. I'm going to have to go and research. That just came to me while we were talking about the woman at the well and how it's just a master class in therapy. And if you're listening and maybe you're a person of faith, you're a Christian, and you feel as if reaching out for help, it's somehow wrong. Like, shouldn't this all be solved the moment that you accept Christ? And absolutely, the greatest dilemma, our sin dilemma, was solved by accepting Christ. But Jesus is a doorway. He said, I am the door. He opens us up to understand how we can live an abundant life by teaching us the principles of the kingdom. And therapy does not have to be exclusive from your faith. It can be one and the same. And whether that's reaching out to someone like Trevor or reaching out to us, we are here to help. We offer marriage mediation to help you navigate some of these emotional challenges that you're facing and connect your emotions to experiences that will help reshape the way that you think about life. So go to moremostforever.com, connect with us, sign up for marriage mediation, become a partner, engage in our intentional marriage community, and attend one of our events, especially the one coming up in August 30th to 31st. The Forevermore Marriage Getaway is a truly remarkable experience, unlike any other marriage event, because it's the hybrid of a luxurious, relaxing experience with encounters with the living God and workshops with practical teaching that will help transform your marriage for the better. So go right now to forevermoregetaway.com or moremostforever.com and engage in all of those resources. This has truly been a needed conversation. I'll be happy to talk with Victoria about it, especially at the beginning of next week's episode. So tune in then to hear kind of what her perspective of it is and jump into our next great conversation. God bless.